You delete the photo, then open the trash folder. Your body remembers them before your mind can protest. And that contradiction can feel deeply confusing, especially when you know they hurt you. So why do you still miss them? Why does absence ache after disappointment? If that pull keeps returning, you're not broken. You're reacting to something real. What you miss is not always the person. Sometimes it's the bond your nervous system built around them. By the end, you'll understand why the longing lingers. And you'll know what that feeling is truly asking for. Missing someone is not proof they were good for you. It is often proof they matter deeply inside your emotional world. A relationship can be unhealthy and still become important. That is the part many people silently judge themselves for. But here's what's really going on. Your heart does not attach only to kindness, safety, or consistency. It can also attach to intensity, unpredictability, hope, relief, and repetition. Those experiences leave strong emotional fingerprints. If someone gave you closeness in brief flashes between long stretches of distance, your brain learned to chase the return. Not because you were weak, dramatic, or naive, because uncertainty can make attention feel more urgent than peace. That is why inconsistent affection can leave such a deep mark. The good moments glow brighter because you worked harder to reach them. Think about the text that finally arrived after hours of silence. That small wave of relief can train longing incredibly fast. But there's a twist most people miss. Sometimes you are not missing the person as much as the release from tension. You are missing the exhale after confusion. The nervous system often confuses relief with love when it has waited too long. So when they disappear, your body does not only miss them, it misses the temporary calm it hoped they would bring. That is why longing can feel so physical. Your chest tightens, your thoughts loop, and your body acts before logic arrives. You are not only remembering who they were, you are remembering what your system expected to feel around them. And this is the beautiful part. Once the pattern has language, shame usually starts losing some of its power. Another reason you miss someone bad for you is unfinished emotional business. Pain that never made sense likes returning for meaning. A healthy ending gives grief somewhere to land. A confusing ending keeps grief pacing in circles for much longer. Maybe they hurt you, and then acted tender. Maybe they pulled away and still said just enough to keep hope alive. Maybe they never fully chose you, yet somehow never fully released you. That kind of mixed signal creates a powerful ache. Not only because of what happened, but because your mind keeps trying to solve what never became emotionally clear. We are deeply tempted by unfinished stories. They make one more conversation feel like it could settle everything. One more apology seems like it could finally balance the pain. One more good moment seems like it might explain the rest. But often closure is not hiding inside another interaction. It is waiting inside a more honest interpretation of the pattern. Here is the honest interpretation. Some people were not confusing because they were deep, but because they were inconsistent. And inconsistency makes people search harder, not love better. It keeps the heart working without giving it real rest. There is also something quieter underneath missing the wrong person. Sometimes they fit an old emotional blueprint inside you. Not because they were right for you, because they felt familiar to parts of you trained to work for connection. If closeness once felt conditional in your life, you may feel unusually pulled toward people you have to win. Usually, that does not feel like a pattern. It feels like chemistry, spark, fate, or someone mattering more than they should. But the spark is not always safety. Sometimes it is recognition, and recognition can feel powerful even when it hurts. Your system says, I know this road. It says that even when the road has already bruised you before. This is why calm love can feel strangely unfamiliar at first. It does not trigger the same chase or constant decoding. It does not make you rehearse every text message. It does not keep you wondering whether warmth will vanish tomorrow. And if you learn to associate longing with love, peace can feel almost too quiet to trust right away. So here's something to remember. Missing chaos does not mean chaos was your soulmate or your deepest connection. It may simply mean your body has more practice with tension than with steadiness. Practice creates preference before happiness. There is another layer people rarely say out loud. Sometimes you miss the version of yourself that existed around them. Maybe you felt more alive while waiting for them. Maybe rare warmth made you feel chosen in an intoxicating way. Maybe the relationship gave your mind a mission. You were analyzing, hoping, recovering, preparing, and trying all over again. That kind of effort can quietly become an identity. You become the one who can fix, endure, or finally be chosen. When the relationship ends, you do not only lose a person, you also lose the role you are performing around them. You lose the project of trying to make it work. You lose the future version of you that kept saying, soon. That imagined future can be difficult to release. It held so much emotional investment, patience, fantasy, and private bargaining. A small everyday moment can prove this. You make coffee and reach for your phone before you have fully woken up. Not because they were especially kind, because they had been woven into your rhythm, your reflexes, and your emotional timing. The human heart is tender, but it is also habitual. It notices absence in ordinary places before it understands truth. The empty seat in the car can sting. The song you skip too quickly can say more than any big speech. The joke you almost send can reopen the ache. Tiny moments often carry the loudest reminders of attachment. These moments can trick you into believing the relationship was better than it truly was. But often you are grieving disruption. Your routine now has holes in it, and the mind loves filling empty spaces with idealized memories and hopeful edits. That is why distance can soften reality. The late apology becomes brighter than weeks of confusion and emotional exhaustion. One sweet weekend can suddenly stand in front of 100 draining conversations. Memory becomes selective when loneliness enters the room. And loneliness is persuasive. It whispers that familiar pain may be easier than unfamiliar peace, especially on quiet nights. But that whisper is not wisdom. It is discomfort trying to negotiate a return to what it already knows. Here is a gentle reframe. You are not failing because you miss them. You are grieving in several layers at once. One layer misses the person, another misses the pattern, another misses the hope, and another misses the imagined future. When all those layers speak together, longing sounds deeply convincing, but convincing feelings are not always accurate guides. This is where many people get pulled backward. They assume intense feeling must mean the connection was meant to be. Yet strong feelings often point to unresolved learning, not lasting compatibility. Volume is not the same thing as truth. A fire alarm is loud too. That does not mean you should move into the smoke and call it home. And that image matters, because missing someone can make you romanticize returning to the place that depleted you. So, how do you tell the difference between love and emotional withdrawal? Listen closely to what you actually miss. Do you miss being understood, or do you miss waiting to be understood? Those are emotionally different experiences. Do you miss their actual character, or do you miss your fantasy finally becoming real after all that effort? Do you miss how they treated you on ordinary days, or only the rare days everything briefly felt possible? Those questions change everything. They separate the person from the longing that wrapped itself around the person. Sometimes what hurts most is not losing who they were. It is losing who you hoped they would eventually become. That is a different grief entirely, and it deserves a different kind of honesty from you. You can love someone's potential and still suffer in their patterns. You can understand their wounds and still be wounded. You can miss them and still know returning would cost too much. That is not confusion. That is maturity growing. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel deeply without abandoning the truth. And truth usually lives in ordinary details, not dramatic ones. It shows up in the daily emotional climate. Truth is how often you felt calm around them. Truth is whether your needs were respected without punishment or silence. Truth is whether love made your life steadier or smaller. Truth is how your body felt after conversations ended. If you always needed recovery after contact, that matters. If affection came mixed with anxiety, that matters too. If being loved by them made you doubt yourself more often than it grounded you, that matters more than chemistry. Sometimes healing begins when you stop asking, "Why do I miss them?" and ask, "What did this bond train me to crave?" That question is softer, wiser, and far more revealing. It moves you from self-blame into self-understanding. Maybe the bond trained you to crave relief. Maybe it trained you to crave validation from difficult people. Maybe it trained you to confuse emotional intensity with importance. Maybe it trained you to ignore your own exhaustion. Once you can see the training, you can begin replacing it, not through force, but through steady repetition. You build new evidence inside your life. You let consistency become more attractive than uncertainty and more familiar than chaos. You practice noticing how peace feels in your body. You stop calling that quietness boring or emotionally empty. You stop feeding the fantasy every time memory edits the story. You remember the full weather, not only sunsets. You talk to yourself in complete sentences. Yes, I miss them, and no, that does not mean they were good. Yes, there were beautiful moments. And yes, the pattern still hurt me. Both truths can live together. Yes, I wanted it to work, and wanting is not the same as receiving real, steady, mutual love. These truths can sound plain at first, but plain truths are often the ones that quietly set us free. If this sounds like your story, you're not alone, and you can share that gently in the comments. Healing is usually less cinematic than longing. It is more repetitive, more grounded, and much more honest. It happens when you stop visiting the relationship only through its highlights. It happens when you include the cost. It happens when you let yourself miss them without turning that feeling into a command to return. And over time, something shifts inside you. The ache becomes information instead of instruction or prophecy. The memory becomes lighter because it no longer gets to decide your future. It becomes part of your wisdom. You start noticing that what once felt magnetic also felt expensive. You begin respecting the price you were paying. You start trusting the part of you that wants calm. You stop calling that part boring and start calling it wise. If this gave a name to something you've been carrying, stay close for more gentle truths like this. And if you want, subscribe and keep walking with us. Because love is not only about who you miss, it is also about what you are learning to choose. One day, the person who once felt impossible to release may simply feel like a chapter you finally understand. Not meaningless, not erased, and not denied. Just no longer in charge of your heart. And that is when missing them stops being a trap. It becomes proof that you can feel deeply and still move forward.